my coffee and my fireplace and I'm journaling and reading.
I'm there.
Don't get me in the cold or in the rain in the morning and try and get me to work out. But, I guess if you want to be like very precise, the best time to ingest sugar is after workout because you've just done that work. So, we tell a lot of our athletes like that would be technically the best time to take a gummy because you're replenishing your body a little bit. Although it's only like 20 calories. And you're kickstarting recoveries. You're kickstarting like the pain and inflammation response in your system. And then obviously at night, you can kind of take it through the afternoon and then at night to help with the more sedative effects, calming effects to kind of get you a good night's sleep.
So it sounds like it works for you kind of at all times of day and for lots of different reasons, which is the feedback that a lot of folks give about CBD, especially athletes, especially those who have been through injuries and deal with kind of chronic pain. And at the moment, we've got the World Anti-Doping Agency even reconsidering some of the guidelines on whether cannabis should be allowed for athletes, whether that's CBD or THC. It looks like THC is a very long way off, but CBD looks a little more plausible. But I want to discuss a little more whether you think it's performance enhancing, because if it gets rid of pain and it helps with recovery, should that be considered a performance enhancing drug?
No, not at all. I mean, if you're going to call CBD or hemp or cannabis performance enhancing, then you're going down a rabbit hole. I mean, then you should consider magnesium performance enhancing because there's over 300 reactions in the body that require that mineral, magnesium. It helps with recovery. It helps with sleep. It helps relax and calm your muscles, especially after a hard workout. Then you would have to consider protein supplementation, potentially performance enhancing, because we all know when you do a hard workout, you're tearing your muscle fibers. And so you want to get the protein in there to help rebuild them. So you're kind of opening up a can of worms if you're going to consider a plant like cannabis or hemp performance enhancing. Does it help kickstart recovery? Yes. Does it help get you a better night's sleep? Yes. But if opioids and Ambien aren't performance enhancing, which is a synthetic drug, that's not even natural, I don't see how someone could argue that CBD is performance enhancing.
Yeah, I agree completely. Then there are folks that say that THC, that's a bit of a gray area. I agree with that only because of one of the football players from the Dallas Cowboys, and that's my team, and I hate to admit it because they're terrible, but I've stuck
America's team, huh, Brit? Wow, the Cowboys.
I had to go all in with NFL. I went for the Cowboys. No, I actually moved to Dallas. When I first moved to the US, I moved to Dallas. And, it's been like a 15-year thing. I can't leave him now.
Yeah, but it gets in your blood.
Yeah, I'm stuck now, like for life. But one of the Cowboys, Sean Smith, said back in 2019 that before every game, he would smoke 2 blunts, and that's THC. And he said that it would make him feel unstoppable on the field. And like he could take pain and he wouldn't really feel it, like he was numb. And that's the point where I feel like, okay, now cannabis is a performance enhancing drug. There's such a strange gray area because CBD and THC are just cannabinoids from the same plant. Like, how do we really differentiate when somebody is getting their performance enhanced from a drug and another athlete is not,
Yeah, I mean, I just disagree. I fundamentally disagree because if you're allowed to like be shot up with Toradol and if you're on opiates playing, if you're taking an anti-anxiety medication, what would be the difference then? I mean, I think someone could argue that he felt like he was unstoppable because it reduced anxiety and it just helped him focus and it kind of like made him a little bit more clear-minded. And he was just in a more relaxed state maybe before he took the field for combat, because that's basically what football is. But I mean, if athletes are allowed to take, prescripted pain relief medications pre, during, and post games that numb all the pain, then, I mean, what's the difference? And that's not a performance enhancing drug,
Yeah, I think you've convinced me. That's true. I want to touch a little bit more on what you went through as an athlete yourself and the first time you used CBD. Do you remember the first time you used CBD and felt the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I vividly remember. It actually wasn't that long ago. Like, embarrassingly, I smoked a little, and I was kind of a newbie. It was really not until like my late 20s. I smoked a little in college. I had that one terrible brownie trip in my mid
Everybody
20s.
does.
Yeah. Someone gave me a bag of weed and I made some brownies. And like after an hour, I didn't feel anything. So I ate 6. And then
Uh-huh.
3 hours later, I literally thought I was dying. Um, so then, that kind of scarred me for several years, and I didn't touch THC after that. But then once I got my master's degree and I started my previous business, which was that performance training business, and I was training a lot of athletes, I had a lot of athletes using mostly cannabis products at the time.
CBD or?
They weren't using like a ton of CBD products, or if they were, they didn't know like if it was marijuana derived CBD or hemp derived CBD. They were bouncing around from a lot of different brands. So naturally, as their trainer, I was really curious and wanted to know like what they were taking and why. They felt better. They certainly liked taking it more than the prescriptive medications that they were taking. So I started doing my research. This was probably like 30, maybe late 20s, 30, 31. And started taking CBD products and went through, the kind of whole like self-discovery anecdotal process that one usually goes through with CBD, because it is different for everyone.
And what did it do for you?
I would say for me, like after taking hemp products every day for 2 months, I would say that was when I like really noticed some pretty significant changes. And for me, I still had pain. I still had inflammation. I certainly was getting more restful night sleeps. But I would say in general, though, it just was balancing my body out. Like instead of having the high highs and the low lows and like the coffee crashes at 2 p.m., I just felt more mentally sustained and calm throughout the day. And I had like never really felt that before. So that was probably the most noticeable effect that I felt after a couple months.
And did you find that it was sort of helping in other areas of your life as well?
I found that it helped primarily with like my mental and emotional state, like reduction in the anxiousness, kind of just like throughout my workday, just like calming me before work, which then helps me stay more focused and more present. I love, like, again, after I work out, I love popping in a gummy, and that kind of like helps with like the full body anti-inflammatory pain relief. And it also just keeps me calm to kind of like finish out the rest of my day. And then I pretty much take some sort of CBD supplement at night for bed, like every night.
So this is a huge part of your life now. What do you think that the experience that you went through really brings to what you do at Mendi?
I think that it helps that I have a pretty like rich science background. I think it is really important to be able to speak to the science of the endocannabinoid system and just like natural endocannabinoids that we make in the human body versus phytocannabinoids, and sort of like explaining it in the same way that you would explain most other supplements. That seems to like resonate with a lot of athletes, because most people are taking vitamins and minerals and protein supplementation. And it's really no different when you're taking cannabinoid supplementation. There's just only so much endocannabinoids that we make in the human body. And so it's important to supplement with phytocannabinoids to keep you more at balance. So I do think that's really important. I think being an athlete and going through as many injuries as I went through, and having the unfortunate experience of taking as many opiates as I took, I can speak to that epidemic and journey as an athlete in a very sincere way. And I think that that's something that resonates with a lot of other athletes as well.
The athletes that I've spoken to who have had injuries, opioids, it's a huge reason that folks get medical marijuana cards. The data reflects that. A lot of people in the Midwest seem to get it for those exact reasons, for opioids and for pain. And for others who have education in sort of health sciences, or others who are medically trained or working in the world of athletes, what do you think it's really important for those people to understand as we see sort of the rise of CBD in the sports world?
Well, one thing I'm constantly, I feel like, combating is this notion that there's not a lot of research done. And that's false. I mean, there is a ton of white paper data, and white paper data is legitimate research that's been done or conducted with legitimate findings. It may not have been done in a medical institution that deems it credible, But the findings are still legitimate. We certainly would love to have more controlled human trials done at institutions like, UCLA or the Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins. And I think that we'll get there one day once we get the full support of the FDA. But that is something that I feel like I'm kind of constantly combating. It's the notion that there's just not enough evidence, and it's kind of this like snake oil, and we know that's not true. We know why it works and how it's interacting in the human body and how it's interacting with the receptors in our body. And that does just take a little bit of your own research to kind of uncover that. But I mean, if you Google CBD research, there's millions of data points that you can read on. So I would say like that's probably the biggest area of just like misunderstanding in the industry, and particularly with professionals that are working with athletes and trainers and medical practitioners that are working in the sports landscape.
Do you find that there's any stigma among athletes still towards even something like CBD that's not intoxicating?
It's getting better. I mean, even just in the last 2 years, it's gotten significantly better. When we launched in 2019, I actually went to, so here in the United States, we have a women's professional soccer league, and it's called the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
Yep.
It's and not so should not be soccer. I'm just saying. Yes.
National Women's Football League. We have 9 teams. And so in 2019, I went to 6 of the 9 teams, and I did focus groups with each of those teams and with the players. And I passed out products, and we did surveys, and we asked questions, and we got feedback. And during that time, it was very stigmatized. And I would say most players were pretty nervous taking CBD, and
wow.
Not nervous, but just really had no idea what it was, what the difference was between marijuana and hemp, THC and CBD. And they were kind of nervous talking about it, and they really had no experience with it. And I would say only like a handful of players on the team were even using CBD or THC. Now, 2 years later, it is so much different. I think a lot of players in the NWSL didn't even realize that they didn't have a cannabis testing policy, that they could be using this stuff freely. They had no idea. Yeah, they were just so nervous to like not have traces of THC in their system. And I kept telling them, like, it doesn't matter if you do, you're not getting tested. There's no consequences.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that either, actually.
Yeah. So, I would say like on the Olympic level, so WADA and the IOC, like there's still a lot of fear around having traces of THC in your system, which is understandable because in the case of Sha'Carri Richardson, she was banned from the Olympics, and it's once every 4 years. So the consequences far outweigh in an athlete's mind the benefits of using it. And that's really what needs to change. Obviously I'm pro cannabis, and I don't think we should have testing policies. And there's some leagues that have done a great job of kind of being first movers, like the Major League Baseball League, the MLB. They dropped their cannabis policy last year. So they're not testing at all. They have an open cannabis policy for all their players, which is really exciting. And they're actually now testing for, I think, cocaine and another drug. So they actually put in a few other drugs in their testing policies and replaced them with cannabis.
Well, look at that. I actually didn't know that. I thought it was just the National Hockey League that was on that level.
No, hockey is definitely has been the most progressive. And then MLB last year dropped their cannabis policy in general.
And then basketball this year, right?
Basketball and then WNBA. So the NBA and the WNBA technically still have a cannabis policy. They haven't completely dropped it, but essentially last year and this year, they just said, we're not going to test for it. But it's technically still a policy. I think we all know it's probably, what's happening and where we're moving in those two sports, but they haven't technically dropped them. And then the NFL still has a policy, but they've said if their players test positive, there won't be any punishments.
Right. And I think they check like once a year, and they give them weeks heads up, and like,
yeah. So we
all know what's going on.
Yeah, I know. In the MLS, or the Major League Soccer League, which is the men's side, they have an open CBD policy, but technically they have a THC ban. So it's all slowly loosening. It's very disjointed. I wish that everyone could just get on the same page and just say like, fuck it, use cannabis because we know it's way better for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I hope that soon enough more athletes will get to use it, not just for recovery, but like for recreation, for goodness sake. You're just humans who need to sometimes kick back and enjoy a joint, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that it's performance enhancing for most people. So I'm looking forward to more research in that area as well. And I really appreciate